Dear youth of today, my name is Pieter Tauftevoer and I'm a 3-time Olympian. But it's you, the youth, who inspire me. You've been mobilizing in record numbers to fight for issues which are important to the world. You fight for gender equality. You fight for a better planet, for a cleaner environment. You fight for more financial stability. I'm sure some of you didn't plan to become activists. But now more than ever, we need you. I'm sure you dreamt of other areas to head off to in life, to go and explore the world. But the world needs you, the youth. You represent over half the world's population are under 30. A quarter of you are under 18. And you're fighting for what we need most in the world, which is change. Us adults, we've fallen short many a time. We've dropped the ball, so to speak. The way the world is changing is going to influence and impact you more than us. And here you are fighting for that future. You, the youth, inspire me. I know that there are going to be times where it's going to be tough, where it's going to feel like it's an uphill battle. I know there are going to be times where you're going to meet resistance. But if you follow what's in your heart, if you dream of a better world, and you follow that thing that pulls you towards it to make this better world, then I can guarantee you that you are on the right path. Do not get tired, do not get weary. Keep fighting. Us, the adults, we have a whole lot to learn. You deserve to be at the heart of every conversation because you, the youth, you are our future. This is Pieter Tauftevoer, wishing you nothing but the best of Fatu.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you're dialing in from. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you, Peter, for sharing your energizing message with all of us today. My name is Aishwarya Machani, and I'm one of 8 Next Generation Fellows hosted by the United Nations Foundation. Me and my fellow fellows have been working hard all year to help shape the United Nations Secretary General's Our Common Agenda. You'll hear more about this later in the programme. So why are we here today? Well, young people around the world are facing a series of crises that they did not cause. We believe this needs to change. We need your help to unlock a more safe, green, and just future for young people and future generations. The good news is that there is now a growing number of movements, networks, and organizations working to build a coalition for young people. We would like to thank some of them. BRAC, the Global Youth Mobilization, an initiative powered by the Big 6 youth organizations, Restless Development and the Youth Collective, the Davos Lab, an initiative of the World Economic Forum's Global Shapers community, and Gallup for coming together with the UN Foundation to organize this event. We have a packed show ahead of us today. First, we'll hear from leaders of all generations who are working for a better future for young people. And then around 10 a.m. New York time, after the launch of the Unlock Declaration, we'll break for the after party, giving us all an informal opportunity for networking in breakout groups. Finally, before we begin, I ask you to please make this a real dialogue. Please use the chat function as much as possible. And perhaps we can get started by putting where you're calling in from and your year of birth in the chat. I'd love to see the range of generations who are joining us today. Great, so fantastic to hear from so many of you all. And now, to kick us off, we have a chance to hear from two incredible young women here with me today to discuss why and how we need to work with leaders to unlock the future. Joining us is Mazoon Al-Malehen, a Syrian refugee who was forced to flee from home country at the age of just 13. She is an education activist and has been a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador since 2017. And I'd also like to introduce you to Hilda Nakabuye, a Ugandan climate and environmental rights activist who founded the incredible Ugandan Fridays for the Future movement. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today to talk about what leaders can and should be doing to unlock the future. You're both such inspirational women and doing so much to fight for the rights of young people. With all of that, let's get started. I don't think we can have this conversation without talking about what's been happening over the past year or so. Young people from across the world have been hit hard by the pandemic, and as you know, the frequency of crises like this is only going to increase as global temperatures rise. What impact do you think this will have on the prospects and futures of young people? Mazoon, perhaps you can kick us off?
First of all, thank you so much, Ish, and it's such a great pleasure to be here with all of you. Definitely, young people have been suffering so much in the past years, and they are still suffering from different actually crises because we have conflicts, we have climate change, we have lack of opportunities such as education. So all these obstacles prevent young people to play a vital role in their societies. But despite all of this, they are doing their part and they are trying their best basically to fight these challenges. They raise their voices, they don't give up. They also want the world to hear their voices and their messages. So I think the impact will be, really negative, and it will lead to many disasters if we don't act seriously to stop these challenges. We have to start with real, actually, and decisive actions to end all these obstacles. And of course, young people are a great part of this. We cannot ignore them. They must be on the table. It should be the normal, not the exception, basically, because young people, they have solutions and they can offer ideas to make this world a better place to all of us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mazoon. And I think you're right. Regardless of where young people are in the world, we do have these kind of common problems. And really good point. Hilda?
Yes, thank you so much for having me here today and for having me to share with the other people on the other side of the of the world. And I totally agree with what Mazoon is saying, because we young people are the future. We will be creating the future generations, and we bear this responsibility amidst the crises that we are facing right now. We are at crossroads with the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course, with the greatest challenge that humanity is facing, and that is climate change. And this is really big for us youth, because in most cases, we are not included in or climate action plans that are actually made for us youth or for the future generations. So this inclusion is limiting us from participating in such crucial discussions that take place in, closed rooms without our know. And this will not only affect us, but also the coming generations. So we are not able to give or to air out our ideas or recommendations about a future we want, whether we want it sustainable or with fossil fuels, and we therefore are limited. And also, we youth are not given space in, organizing, especially at national level and international level. So that is why we youth globally are standing up and creating our own groups and mobilizations to see that we are also included, that our ideas also, because we right now are mobilizing, we are organizing, we are creating community outreaches, we are gathering, we are having these climate strikes and these local activities that we are doing that will help us have a safer future. but this is being limited by the COVID-19 pandemic as we have restrictions in transport and social distancing, social gatherings. But we are not giving up. We are taking further steps to have these online actions that we are doing, either at our homes or in small numbers with following the necessary protection by the standard operating procedures that are put out by the government. And we are trying our best to communicate that we need to be included in decision-making plans and also climate action plans, because we are the ones who will suffer the most from an unsafe future that world leaders are trying to plan right now without us.
Yeah, I think that's completely right, Hilda. And I think you raised two really important points there. First is the kind of absurdity of the fact that we're the ones that are going to be inheriting this planet, but we aren't the ones that are making the decisions. And the second one is that just young people have really proved over the past year how determined they are to continue mobilizing, even in the midst of something like a pandemic. Mazoon, do you have anything else to add to that? How, in your experience as a young people fighting back, even when governments are slow to act or in some cases silencing them?
I think, like, despite all the positions when young people are disappointed, they speak. I think using their voices is one of the biggest ways young people are fighting back and doing what they can. Because I think as young people, our greatest weapon we are using is our voices to just raise awareness about what we are facing, and also raise awareness about what other young people are suffering in other parts of the world. This is one of the things they are doing, but also they are leading campaigns, they do advocacy work, they are demonstrating, they also speak in important events like the one that we are talking in it right now. This unlock the future of young people to be more active in the world and to be part of the solution, not only part of the problem or part of the impact. So yes, our voices are strong and we believe in our voices, and this is what we have to offer to the world.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think you've done a really great job of highlighting that young people will be persistent even in the face of challenges like a pandemic, which really just raises the question of why isn't change happening then? And I think, unfortunately, this kind of falls to the sort of inaction of leaders. So I have one final question for you. This week, the world's leaders are gathering in New York for the UN General Assembly. So do you both have a message to them as we mobilize to unlock the future? Hilda, perhaps you could get us started?
Well, yes, I have a message for world leaders, and my fellow activists have been saying the same message to world leaders for centuries now, but this inaction is keeping on, and leaders are keeping it up. So first of all, I would like to applaud leaders, the 76 meetings that they have been holding. For all this while, it's really a lot of time of meet and greet, but no concrete action is being taken. Yet people, ecosystems, and the biodiversity it's extincting, and we are living in times of horror. This is the time where I expect leaders to leave their misunderstanding behind and come together and fight crises we are facing this generation as one, because for generations, indigenous people and marginalized communities have been fighting and battling with the climate crisis, but still no concrete action is being taken. So my message is that we need our leaders to put on their big boy pants, to stand up and to take concrete climate action. And this should be global and intersect, because this is what the world needs. We need to recover. We need to change the system that we are living in right now. And my last message, I would say, is that for so long they have let us down, but this is the time where show us they are capable of changing the system that we are in, because the change is needed and we need this change right now. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for such a powerful message, Hilda. I just don't really have that much more to add. So Mazoon, over to you.
I think this is a really important question, and it was really great to hear the wise words by Hilda. She has highlighted really important points, and it is really important for world leaders to take decisive actions because it is time for actions. Of course, it is really important for them to meet, to talk, to share awareness and knowledge about what is going on in the world. But of course, it is time to hear from them real actions on the ground because the challenges are too many and they are increasing, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen education, for example, has been really affected because millions of children around the world, they couldn't catch up with their learning because they don't have access to remote learning. They don't have internet, they don't have computers, they don't have laptops, they don't have all these facilities basically to learn online. I have been suffering really so much studying online, for example, but thankfully I was able to continue my education. But at the same time, I was thinking about millions who cannot learn during a crisis like COVID-19 pandemic. So it is time to hear from them alternative ways for children to be able to learn when it comes to a crisis like COVID-19 and any challenge they face, because they must go to school and they deserve to learn at any circumstances and under any challenge they have in their lives. So not only about education, but any challenge that is facing us, it is time for world leaders to unite, to work together, to put their disagreement aside and to show us they can really change our lives for better, because we want to hear positive change in the lives of children, and we don't want to hear more suffering and obstacles that children and young people are facing. So I hope after their meetings in the General Assembly, we hear what they are going to do on the ground, because this is what we want to hear from them. And I wish them all the best in their meetings, and looking forward for a better future for every child and young person in the world.
Yeah, thank you both for just such poignant and resounding calls to action. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, lots of governments are actually reducing spending in education while they need to be increasing it. And of course, the clock is ticking to address the planetary emergency. But to both of you, unfortunately, we are out of time. So thank you so much for giving up your time to be here. I think you've done a really fantastic job of highlighting the risks of failing to act urgently for young people. And you provided some really concrete suggestions as to how leaders can actually start to unlock the future. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you too.
So I can see the chat is completely blowing up, and it's great to have people from all over the world here with us. I can see people from the US, Kenya, France, and China. I won't be picking on the eldest person in the room with us today, but I've definitely spotted that Alia and Safia were born in 2009 and 2011, respectively. So it's great to have such young members of the audience. Thank you so much for joining us. In a moment, we're going to hear from some global leaders. But before we do, I want to ask you a question. If you could save just one thing for the future, what would it be? That's the question we Next Generation Fellows asked each other before we opened our digital time capsule, The Future Vault. We'd love to know what one thing you might save for future generations and why, using the social media hashtag #OneThingForTheFuture. But for now, let's drop into a conversation on the Upper East Side. Right now, world leaders are in New York for the UN General Assembly, and we brought two of them together with some young people just this week to talk about how they might help on issues like education, climate, and youth representation. We just got the first cut of the video of their meeting and want to share it with you now.
what you have in front of you are our recommendations, our hopes, and also our dreams for our future. You will see it covers many different topics, including jobs, education, political participation, and also ways that we think we should rejuvenate the multilateral system.
Dreams are quite similar when we were young, kind of same dream. You want a job, you want good education, and all these things. You want to travel, I wanted to become a football player, professional, but I never made it.
When I was about your age, I wanted to be a writer, actually. I wanted to tell stories. There's one big story, at least there are several, but one for your generation that's related, for example, with climate change. When I think about my son, he is 8. When I think about him and what's it going to be like, his world, your world, then that is energy to pursue change. That's passion in order to divert the direction we are heading. Well, I believe me being kind of young has helped because perhaps it's easier for me to translate certain worldviews to action, or perhaps comprehend better. But my real takeaway is that age is not an obstacle to make change happen.
And you talked about climate change. I found it interesting, in both your countries you have climate as something that is taught in schools, which is not in a lot of countries. And we know that through the pandemic 90% of students weren't able to continue in-person classes, and now more than 10 million people won't be able to go back to school. And so we were interested to know, especially in the sphere of technology, as a lot of young people need technology to either go to work or go to school, what do you think your countries need that you're not doing? Because I know you're doing a lot already. You're teaching climate change, there's a high literacy in both of your countries, but what is it that you're not doing and that you could do better in the sphere of education to bring more young people technology or other tools that can help them have that?
We can provide technology, but then again, given the fact that the world is so different, the inequality, I think we need to make sure that many students all have this right to technologies. I think it must be one of the things that when we have cooperation with other countries, poorer countries also, we need to think that through, because education is so critical, it's key.
In the case of Costa Rica, we're doing a strong effort. We invest a lot in education, and it's one of our human talent. It's what we call our best feature. It's not it's not the mineral resources, or it's people. That's the most precious thing as a country you have.
We have a pandemic going on. We have a serious climate issue that we need to take care of. We have inequalities in our world, and we need to improve that and step up. And the best way of doing that is to listen to young people. Can I ask you guys about participation and inclusion? Yes. I think is key. And we need to increase that. We need to get more people involved. And I know sometimes we're told that young people are not that interested in the formal democracy. Young people are into, for example, climate and more of an activist role. But at the same time, we know that we need politicians also in the future. What's your view on that?
I truly think that the idea that young people are not interested is actually a myth and not a reality. I have never met a person that is young and is not interested in politics or the environment or just basically what's happening in their nearest context. I think the actual question is, what can governments and institutions do to be rejuvenated and to be more open and interesting for young people to be part of them? Because young people are going to continue doing their thing outside the government if they need to. And I feel like sometimes I speak now as a student that is interested in policy and government. I think it can be challenging for us students to try to find a way inside the system, because it feels like the system is old, it feels like the system is outdated.
I also wanted to add that I agree 100%. We do also need your support, your belief, and your trust in in us to actually contribute to the great work and the great vision that you have ahead of you?
In my case, I ran to be a political presidential candidate when I was 37. I started, and I became president at 38. Now I'm 41. It's hard on the body, but
Don't tell me about it.
in that we also can agree. If I were to give a piece of advice and do not take it for granted as a complete reality, is get involved and don't ask for permission, anyone's permission. Get involved, participate, and you will surprise yourselves.
We need to listen to young people. It's their future, it's their planet that they will inherit. So we need to give the best that we can. And in order to be able to do that, we need to listen.
My takeaway from the conversations today actually is a good one. It's hope. Because when you see people that are engaged, that want to get involved, want to participate, that means that there is hope that things can change and things are changing.
So how did you feel that went?
I think that was very exciting. I think the thing that I most appreciated from this conversation is, realizing that all of us share something in common, and that is the fact that we were all or are all young at one point. Yeah. So I feel like that was a very important factor to also humanize that connection and that conversation.
So what do we want to see going forward? The impact that they will create, but also the impact that others that they will inspire will create.
I would like to see this going beyond these two countries and beyond the conversation that we had. This is kind of seen as an unusual right now. It shouldn't be, right? So I would like this to inspire other leaders to have genuine conversations, interactions, and then obviously take action from what they heard.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this conversation. Yeah. It was very fun. And now we can go back with Aish.
I think it's just really encouraging to see global leaders here in New York taking time to debate the future with 3 young activists. So that was just really great. But I think, as Inez said, we really do need more countries to champion young people and to push our priorities to the top of the political agenda. So maybe now you could use the chat to give us your suggestions on which countries and which leaders we should be reaching out to. And of course, Valeria, Inez and Ramazan, we're really grateful that you could speak to these leaders on behalf of young people. I think you did an excellent job of respectfully challenging them. And I'm sure everyone would love to hear more about your experiences in the chat. So now we've heard from young people and political leaders. It's now time to hear from one of the most revered members of a different generation. So let me hand over to Javanik Henry to introduce our next guest, Professor Mohammed Yunus, as they discuss stories of the past, present, and future.
Thank you, Aish. Delighted to be here today with Professor Yunus. So definitely, I think let's get the conversation started. Of course, we know Professor Yunus, who is a Bangladeshi social entrepreneur, economist, civil society leader, and of course, a Nobel Peace Prize winner. So pleasure to be here with you, Professor Yunus.
Thank you. Delighted to be here too.
Yes. Interestingly, we're connecting, I believe, from totally different ends of the world. Me here, right here in the Caribbean, and of course, you're on the other side of the world. But definitely, Professor Yunus, looking at your experiences and of course, your journey within the civil society movement, could you just maybe take us back, and maybe that's a good way to start, as to when or what really inspired you, back in the days to really, where you had that sort of motivation and recognition that the need for to lead and become that sort of leader. Maybe not necessarily what age, but what was your trigger that got you into involved into this movement?
Yeah, this is something that I never thought of. That's something I'll do. This is never in my plan, and I was pushed into it. And I started teaching in the university. And I saw extreme poverty. I knew about poverty all along. That's not new. But this was the extreme form, to the extent we had to confront a famine in 1974. People were dying every day because they didn't have enough to eat. Here I am teaching grand theories of economics in the classroom, lots of enthusiasm. And I see outside the classroom, people are dying because they don't have enough food to eat. So I got very frustrated that what I learned in school, what I learned from the classroom, didn't give me any chance to be helpful, to be useful to people around me. So I felt that whatever I teach, these are empty words, has no meaning in the life of the people. The more I looked at it, the more frustrated I got. And I said, I'm not going to do this. It's something that I wasted my time on, my life on, which didn't make me somebody to make me more useful rather than no useful at all. So I was thinking how to find a use for myself. And that's the beginning of the frustration to some kind of way out for that. So after several days of this, wondering what I should do, one idea came, why don't I just go to the village next door, next to the university campus, be with the people and see if I can find something to do to make make myself useful to other people. So I was trying to see how I can be of some use to somebody, even for a day, even for a tiny little thing, rather than just rot around, not doing anything. So that was the first jump that I did. And I started enjoying it, doing every day, talking to people, learning things, and started doing something for somebody, and very little, very insignificant thing. But in the process, I got familiar with people. So that's the way I became gradually involved in many different things, some series of things which are no longer insignificant, became significant. And one of those things was loan sharking in the village. People are victims of the loan sharks. So I was thinking, how do I protect at least one or two people for not getting victimized by the loan sharks? So I was wondering what I can do. One idea came to my mind, why don't they start lending money to those people? If I lend the money, they don't have to go to loan shark and the problem is solved. Until then, I never thought about lending or anything, just trying to protect people from the loan sharks. So I started doing that out of my own pocket, giving money, small amount of money. They didn't need that kind of money, $2, $5, $10, that kind of money. And it became very popular. So it started growing bigger and bigger, larger and larger number of people doing that. And that took me a completely different route, which later on, I got into lots of controversy with the conventional banks. I said, conventional banks are all wrong. They are lending money to the people who already have money. Real banks should be lending money to people who don't have money, rather than give the money to people who have money.
It's good to see. Maybe Professor Yunus, looking at the time, I just wanted to draw your attention just to, of course, I know you've known for saying regarding that poverty, and we spoke about poverty earlier on, and that it is meant to be in a museum. Essentially, looking at that, and of course, looking at the current challenges which we face globally, the health crisis, and of course, the myriad, the economic issues, high debt levels, etc. Maybe just in brief, would you say as we get to the close of this session, do you still believe that poverty deserves in the museum?
Quickly, I would say yes, indeed. That's what I was saying. Poverty is not created by poor people. Poverty is created by the system that we built. So unless we fix the system, poverty will never disappear. So we have to fix the system so that poverty disappears. Only place you can see poverty will be in the poverty museum, because there is no trace of poverty in the whole world. So our young children will go to see what was the problem, something that called poverty. So we have to create museums for them to see what poverty was like. And they'll be horrified to see how people were punished for no fault of their own. So this is what we wanted to do, and create those kind of things. And I still say the present economic system is the culprit. So this is the culprit that we have to redesign completely. This is taking us in the wrong direction. And I said the older generation cannot help us because their minds are contaminated by old thinking, old way of doing. So young people has to distance themselves from the older generations. Because if you are influenced by the older generation, you'll be again pushed back to the same old roads that created all the problem. And my point is, if you follow the old roads, you'll always end up with the old destination. If you want to go to a new destination, you have to build new roads. And new roads have to be built by new people, because otherwise they'll get mixed up between the old and the new. So distancing from the old thinking, old people's influence is a very important thing for young people to grow up rather than be guided from them. And I say this world has created global warming. This current thinking has created also extreme amount of wealth concentration. All the wealth is concentrated in few hands of the world. 99% of the wealth is controlled by 1% of the population. And 99% of the population has nothing, just simply less than 1% of the wealth. So that kind of world has to be reversed. So the wealth and the people should be living together rather than wealth getting separated out from the people. So this is the kind of thing with reversal of the system, like we created the microcredit, which is the reversal of the banking system. Bank goes to rich, we go to the poor. Bank wants collateral, we said forget about collateral. Bank says we go to men, we say we go to women. Bank says we go to the city center, we say we go to the rural areas. So we reversed everything that the conventional banks do. So similarly, we have to reverse all the thinking process we have. And then we have to create a world without unemployment. These are the 3 zeros that I keep telling the young people. We have to create a world of 3 zeros. 0 net carbon emission to stop global warming, to end up global warming. 0 wealth concentration to end poverty once for all. And 0 unemployment by unleashing the power of entrepreneurship among young people. All the young people should be entrepreneurs, not job seekers. Old thinking pushed us into taking jobs. Job is a slavery. That's not what we want to do. We want to be independent people. We are born as entrepreneurs. So our schools, our learning that we will create will be something to make us able to use our own creative power to change the world that it is. So we will create a world of 3 zeros. And that's the direction. What we are suggesting now, forming 3-0 clubs for young people, forming 5 young people get together and form a 3-0 club. Pursue these on their own rather than get guidance from the older people and so on. So we'll network with all these micro clubs of 5 people globally to change the world in their own way. Young people have all the energy, all the creative power to change the world. So they don't need anybody else's power to make it happen.
Thank you, Professor Yunus. I think all I can say after this is that you've given us, I'd say, the perfect formula, as we'd say in science, for a more just, equitable, and sustainable world, whereby young people can have the power and can actually utilize that power for us all. So thank you again, Professor Yunus. We're out of time, but thank you for your time. And I think certainly inspirational words, and like I'd say, a recipe for a sustainable world for all. Thank you, Professor Yunus.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Over to you, Aisha.
Thank you both very much. I think some quite challenging insights for us all there. I think whatever age we are to take away. And thank you very much to everyone who's participating in the chat as well. I've seen some really personal stories, so thank you for sharing those, and also some great suggestions of countries that have either really young populations now or will have rapidly growing populations in the near future. And I think that's definitely where we should be concentrating our efforts. So we now have a chance to hear from our champion in the international system, the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, Jayathma Wickramanayake. Last week, the Secretary General set out his vision for the future of global cooperation in our common agenda. And in it, he challenges the world to focus on the future and to deepen solidarity with young people and future generations. The next generations were honoured to be asked by the Secretary General to help shape this report and to put together a supporting vision and plan for next and future generations called Our Future Agenda. So Jayathma will be joined by Amélie Mariage, one of her personal nominees as a Next Generation Fellow, to talk about our common agenda and how to turn the proposals into this report into reality. So over to you, Amélie.
Thank you, Ash. Thank you so much for having me today, along with Jayathma, the Secretary General Envoy on Youth. Jayathma, you cannot imagine the illusion that makes me to talk with you today. We are here to talk about young people, with young people, and to young people, and to go deeper on the highlight of our common agenda. So can you please share with us what is our common agenda and what proposal does it make to fulfill the commitments made to listen and work with youth?
Thank you so much, Amelie. First of all, let me congratulate you and the other Next Generation Fellows for the amazing work that you did to channel young people's input into the Common Agenda. Well, for those who do not know what the Common Agenda is, the UN last year celebrated its 75th anniversary. And this was a good reflection point for the UN to see how we should reorganize ourselves or evolve ourselves in order to become a modern 21st century inclusive youth-friendly organization. So there was a number of consultations that were done, but also thousands of young people's voices that were consulted to ask for their vision for a better, more inclusive United Nations. And the Common Agenda report launched by the Secretary General captures these voices of young people in its core, in its center, and provides some very concrete recommendations as to how the United Nations can better listen to and work with young people as the governments promised in the UN 75 Declaration. Now, when you ask what are the key proposals in the Common Agenda, I think for me, the first and the most important one is the call for transformative, universal, quality education. Secondly, removing barriers for political participation of young people. Thirdly, ensuring meaningful, diverse, inclusive youth engagement at local, national, global levels of decision making. Fourthly, the importance of decent jobs for young people by investing and tracking their career paths and labor market outcomes. And lastly, promoting green and digital economy, including job creation within these economies.
Okay, so I think it is clear that we all must work together to build this better future and to go for this proposal. And it is also clear that young people must, and I think want, to have a seat on the table. And one thing, one of the most crucial questions today is, how do you plan to take forward all these proposals and all these recommendations?
Well, I think we already have the tool to do that. We have the youth strategy of the United Nations, Youth 2030, which captures most of the spirit of the recommendations made by the Common Agenda. So we will make sure that we integrate the Common Agenda into all steps of the implementation of the United Nations Youth Strategy. For me, there are very important milestones. For an example, the Transforming Education Summit that is proposed in 2022, the Youth in Politics Index that we will develop together with young people, the Recovery Barometer that we will develop to track paths and labor market outcomes for young people, the High Ambition Coalition to accelerate green jobs and digital economy job creation for young people. The Secretary General in the report also has asked me and my team to develop recommendations for the General Assembly, Security Council, and Economic and Social Council to meaningfully engage young people in their deliberations at the intergovernmental level. It also talks about strengthening my office into a UN office for youth in the Secretariat to anchor UN system coordination, high-level advocacy, and accountability. So there are very concrete steps that we have in the Common Agenda that I would be very honored to lead on the implementation, of course, with the support of amazing young leaders like yourself.
It really resonates with all the work that we have been doing during the past 9 months with all the Next Gen Fellow. And putting the need of the future generation on the top of the agenda. And I think today we particularly want to thank you for your support, for making powerful statements and delivering on youth priority. And lastly, I think that almost all the young people watching us today want to ask you the same question. And it is like, how can young people support all this work?
Well, I have 3 tips for all the young people watching us today. First, please continue to advocate. Please continue to advocate at the international level. Come to the UN, talk to us, talk to your governments, your missions in New York, talk to UN agencies, funds and programs, and make sure you advocate for the implementation, the budgeting, the funding, the resource allocation of the youth agenda at the international level, at the regional level, and of course at the country level. Second, Secondly, don't wait for the UN or don't wait for your governments to deliver on these solutions. It is our future. We have to sometimes take matters into our hands. So please implement your own solutions, come up with innovative ideas, come up with creative ideas, build partnerships with institutions, with private sector organizations, with other young people to also implement these recommendations in your own way, in the way that you choose as young people. Thirdly, what's most important is the action that is happening at the country level. So please make sure that your advocacy continues beyond the United Nations in New York, beyond the United Nations in Geneva, into the parliaments, into the congresses, into the municipal councils of your own countries. Make sure you hold your governments, your elected leaders accountable for delivering on these priorities. Make sure you vote. Make sure that you get your priorities heard by those who have the power to make decisions, and make sure that you are actively participating in civic and political life in your countries, and even run for political office and create this change yourself. And we are looking forward to working together with you hand in hand.
Thank you for this powerful message. Thank you for your time. I feel really grateful to have had this conversation with you today. And I have the feeling that exciting times are coming. Thank you so much, Atma. And back to you, Ash.
Thank you so much, both. And thank you, Jayathma, for your really inspiring leadership for young people. I think just a fantastic lesson there that we should not wait to make a better future for ourselves. Next, I'm going to pass the mic on to Vera Sirikvash, a leading expert on gender and development at YWCA Belarus, who will explore some of the obstacles young people face with a panel of some of the people who are best placed to help us overcome them.
Thank you, Ash, for the introduction. I am pleased to be able to moderate and participate in this conversation. Joining us, we have Rumeitha Al-Busaidi, a co-chair of the DASIS Lab, as well as the Maldives Special Envoy on Climate, Sabra Nurdin, and Assistant Secretary General Volker Turk, also the Secretary General right hand on the Our Common Agenda report. We're literally coming in from all over the world, and this is super exciting. Let's get right to our conversation on confronting the obstacles. The first question I have for everyone is that we've seen the world make ambitious promises to young people and largely failed to keep those promises. For example, in 2008, the global financial crisis that represents one of the many setbacks for millennials around the world that we still have not rectified. Why are these unkept promises still happening, and what can we learn from that? So firstly, Volker, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Vera. I think the common agenda is a real opportunity for a massive transformation when it comes to engagement with young people, and to hear and listen to them in a meaningful way, and to make sure that we learn the lessons from the past. Just to give you one example, when the Secretary General 2 years ago, ahead of the high-level week where all the leaders of the world come together, when he wanted to focus the world on climate and the necessity to effect change on climate, he invited young people from all over the world to come to New York so that there is a lot of pressure put on leaders. And that really made a difference. So we know that this type of events, this type of engagement, where you actually listen to what young people have to say, especially when it comes to what the world is going to look like, it's extremely important. So I would also perhaps add one thing. I think it's better to think of conditions that are necessary for young people to have their voice heard and engaged with, rather than talking about obstacles. But that's just a personal reflection from my side. Over to you, Vera.
Thank you for that valid point, Volker. And let's hear Rumeitha's perspective on this topic. Rumeitha, over to you.
Thanks, Vera. We have always heard those words that opportunities are being created for us young people and that we have so much potential that the world can harness for the good. But unfortunately, young people are still being held back because our potential, I would say, is not being unleashed for the world's recovery. recovery. And I'm not talking about only 2008. We're currently witnessing this as we're living in the middle of a pandemic that has exposed so many systemic flaws in the way the local and global system works. And today, as we actually continue to grapple with the impacts of COVID, I think the main reason why these broken promises are keep on happening is because it lacks inclusivity. It lacks including young people that actually are the voice of the future, that are capable of actually making the difference. And one key thing that we have learned from all of this is that we need to communicate with the world, that young people need to be on the decision-making table on what we see as crucial and important. And this is why we collectively actually came together to show what the world should actually focus on as young people. And this is the work that we did at the Davos Lab, a youth recovery plan that tells the world what we as millennials and Gen Z truly believe in, that should be the priorities that we must work on. And it is now available for everyone to actually read and see. So in short, as we rebuild from this pandemic, children and young people should be at the heart of our recovery. We should be enabled and empowered, just as Vocal said, enough to have a seat on the table and make those decisions that impact us all.
Thank you for this valid point, Rumeitha. And let's turn the floor over to Sabra. Sabra, the floor is yours.
Thank you. In a world, I think, that has been feeling more uncertain, especially for young people, the last 2 years have been even more difficult. The disruption of education, separation from family and friends, loss of jobs, and the inability to plan anything has heightened those sentiments of uncertainty and anxiety. Perhaps one of the reasons why there is a perception of ambitious promises not being seen through is because there was a lack of a sense of urgency. Often in the midst of a crisis, getting caught up in trying to firefight and resolve the short-term issues has meant that policies and institutional frameworks that are needed to address those foundational matters are not adequately put in place. But the climate crisis and the pandemic has shown us that that's no longer an option. What we do now has to ensure recovery in the short term, but also a resilient future for all generations. And with regard to the climate crisis, the undeniable fact is that children and younger generations are amongst those most vulnerable to the impacts. They're also inheriting a problem that was not of their making. And this requires more young people at the table, the opportunity to translate activism to policy, institutional and financial support, and access to innovation and knowledge to build skills and develop tools that facilitate finding solutions to the climate crisis. We are trying in the Maldives to really include the participation of youth in our climate change response. Most of our key policy instruments are nationally determined contributions to the UNFCCC, and the legislation on our newly enacted Climate Emergency Act all prescribe a vital role for youth in our efforts to manage the climate crisis. I believe, it is vital for youth to have a seat at the table. It's not enough to just say, keep raising your voices. That has to be translated, or youth have to be given the opportunity to translate those voices to policy.
Thank you, Sabra, so much for these valid points. And we're moving to the second question. What are the main obstacles to listening to and working with the world's young people? Rumeitha, I feel that you might have interesting insights on that as a global youth leader. So over to you, Rumeitha.
Thank you, Vera. I think we have to recognize that we as young people, as a group, we are very diverse. We have different levels of education, racial and ethnic backgrounds, different lifestyles, and also we have to keep in mind that cultural context. Like, I come from a different country that has a different cultural context to someone in the US, someone in the Maldives, like Sabra, and someone in a different continent altogether. So it is often assumed that more experience is always better as well. And that's something that really kind of removes a big aspect of young people to actually be included in these ways that they can actually be listened to, and that the world community can actually work with young people. Certain types of experiences like attending certain schools or working in a particular profession tend to be valued more than others. And these values and assumptions only privilege a certain type of experience and don't leave room for all young people. And we need to recognize that more and more young people do have valuable skills and knowledge and make room for different kinds and level of experience. Also, the idea that young people don't have as much to contribute as adults is pretty much ingrained in our culture, according to research. And it says that as adults, we often perpetuate the same things that we were told once when we were young by adults who are older now. And this brings to work the work that we actually focused on at the Davos Lab. We asked ourselves and crowdsourced answers from over 2 million people from 150 countries on the question, what would it be for you to be a good ancestor? And the answers were so powerful, with a key message that meant inclusivity, intergenerational partnership, that not only young people, but also the older generation, we need to all work together, practice active listening and involvement. And this is how we can actually get ourselves from the current crisis and ensure that our future generations as well would avoid such crises, because we are listening to each other to come up with an active solution. And a message to those who are listening and watching who don't fall under the young people category, I would say, think of your grown daughter, son, niece, or nephew. You know them as a child, always knew them as a child. But now as they grow up as a young adult, it can be very easy to fall into old habits. And now that they've grown up, it may be hard for many of you to transition to allowing them to make decisions on their own without your judgment. And that, unfortunately, you may find that you treat other young people in a similar way, even if they aren't your family members, without subconsciously. This is how we are ingrained in culture to do. So that's one of the main obstacles, I would say, to listening and working with young people. And I think as we kind of become more aware of the situation that we're living in, and I think with the pandemic, we've grown more aware of active listening since we've all been in lockdown with family members and people that we might not have spent more time with before. I'm very hopeful that this will definitely change.
Yeah, Ramita, I can't agree more. Thank you for this valid points. And now I'm going to come to each of you and ask you, what concrete steps would take over the next 12 months to secure a breakthrough for young people and for future generations? So Volker, over to you.
Well, I've mentioned earlier the Common Agenda report that the Secretary General launched earlier this month. And one of the big novelties in that report is the engagement with young people. I mean, we make a lot of proposals that came also from youth groups all around the world on political representation, on better education, on internet access for everyone, on making sure that we also ensure that in the intergovernmental processes of today, that young people are listened to and can meaningfully engage. And let me just say, apart from all these proposals, let me just say one thing. When I was young, I go back to my formative years, I remember I read a book by a philosopher, Hans Jonas, The Principle of Responsibility. And that book, which is really about the ability of humanity to destroy the planet, was so important for me that I wanted to dedicate my life to that. And that was when I was young. Because I saw that, the fact that we can destroy the planet gives us the momentum to change things in the world. And of course, when in the 70s, in the 80s of last century, I saw that our economic, our social system, our environmental system is doing precisely that. And that was, if you like, when I was young. And it kept me, frankly, also young. And I think it's sometimes good to appeal to us who are a little bit older to remember how we were when we were young and what motivated us to do things in our lives and to change them.
That's brilliant, Volker. And Sabra, what's your opinion on that? Can you share your vision on the concrete steps for the future?
I think quite often young people's views are dismissed as being impractical or idealistic, but the youth aren't necessarily talking idealism, they're talking about survival, especially when it comes to the climate crisis. And it's not just their survival, but the whole planet's. Over the last month, I was able to sit with the Maldives Conference of Youth Representatives and discuss their concerns about the climate crisis. And they were very passionate and pragmatic and keen to get their views across despite many challenges. And some of these challenges include, a lack of institutional access, resources, financial support. And there's also an acknowledgement on the serious need for wider integration of sustainability and climate issues across government and increasing awareness. The difficulties of the bureaucracy of international climate negotiations and the lack of access as a whole. But despite this, I think young people all over the world have been remarkably resilient. So for me, the most concrete step that can be taken in the next 12 months is a truly ambitious and successful COP26. I think that will lead the foundation, that is the foundation for our future.
Sabra, it is brilliant. Rumita, a final word to you.
Thanks, Vera. So I would say I couldn't agree more with Volker and Sabra. I think just adding on to those amazing inputs, we need to change our frame of how we think. Instead of thinking that young people are at a deficit because they don't have much experience, we need to start seeing the opportunity for young people to build skills at a young age by contributing to the efforts that governments and businesses are actually doing. It's a massive opportunity for them, especially if they're looking for a progressive mandate. One result of the survey that we did was, and as a result of the pandemic as well, is currently our generation is a far more organized generation of young voters, consumers, and investors who are rallying behind urgent climate, fiscal, and social justice. And what better way to actually take on that opportunity to actually move forward and be progressive and grab it by the horns if not by including young people. I mean, we all have things to learn, young people and adults alike. And I would say let's treat each other as the leaders that we are and recognize that we can be leaders now, even though that there will be still room for growth. We can still acknowledge that and work together to make a difference.
Thank you, Rumita, and thank you all the amazing panelists. With this, I'm handing it back over to Aish.
Thanks so much, Vera. And it's now time for the final act, at least until the after party, the Unlock Declaration. As you've heard today, we now have a chance to rethink the way in which the world works with and for young people. Over the past few months, a growing group of partners have come together to seize this window of opportunity. The Unlock Declaration is a statement of their and our intent to build an action coalition for young people and future generations. We now have three fantastic guests to tell you more. First, the First Lady of the Maldives, Fazna Ahmed, a champion for education and health, and also the chief guide of the Maldives Girl Guide Association. Next, we'll hear from Carlos Sanvi, the Secretary General of World YMCA, who will present the declaration on behalf of the coalition. And last but not least, we'll hear from Fairouz Bita from the BRAC Youth Platform. Fairouz has just been named a Global Goals Changemaker, so a huge congratulations to her. And with that, over to First Lady Fazna Ahmed.
Good day to you all. My name is Fazna Ahmed, and it is a pleasure to join you for the fifth launch of the Unlock the Future Declaration. As the First Lady of the Maldives, I also have the privilege to work as the Chief Guide of the Maldives. Being part of the Girl Guide movement has given me the exposure to youth-led activities and initiatives and reinforced my belief that youth involvement at all levels is crucial to develop a nation that is inclusive, vibrant, and prosperous. I take true inspiration from the commitment, thoughtfulness, and passion of the youth participating in this event and of the youth at home and around the world. It fills me with genuine hope. I applaud your efforts to come together to prepare the Unlock the Future Declaration. This is a tremendous achievement, and I welcome the commitment of partners to work together to empower our youth and make their voices heard. I would like to thank the leaders of governments and civil society who have gathered today to make a commitment to supporting the next generation. We ask you to work with the Maldives and others committed to this issue so that together we can deliver real change for young people. The Maldives is a young country, and we know that youth voices and meaningful engagement are vital as we work to build a more resilient and sustainable planet. The Girl Guide movement has given me the opportunity to work with many girls and young women and has highlighted the significant role young women play in the development of our communities. The Maldives is committed to engaging actively with our youth, listening to their voices, and working with youth around the world towards a better and brighter future for us all. I thank you.
Thank you, Fazla, for that message. I'm Carlos Sanvi, and as a Secretary General for the World YMCA, I bring together a network of 120 national YMCA movements. Thanks to all the young people who have come together over the past year to get us to this point. I speak today on behalf of my fellow head of the Youth Focus Organization who are signatory to this declaration. The declaration expresses our collective commitment to children, young people, and the future generation at a time of real challenges, crisis, and opportunity. As a partner, we are bound together by 4 principles. First, we will champion a platform for diverse young people to explore, create, lead, and participate. Second, we will increase representation for countries with young populations. Third, we will commit to cooperating in a way that changes young people's lives. And fourth, we will increase accountability to young people at all levels, for grassroots to global. This is the beginning of a journey. Today, we celebrate the UN Secretary General commitment to young people in the publication of our common agenda. We have heard from the Secretary General in Voice on Youth and from member states who are champions for this work. Over the coming months, we will develop the vision, the strategy, and plan for this new coalition in collaboration with partners from across the world, and most importantly, with young people themselves. To hear a response to this declaration from a young leader, I'm delighted to turn to Feroz, who have already achieved great things as an activist with the BRAC youth platform in Bangladesh. Over to you, Feroz.
Thank you, Carlos, for launching the Unlock the Future Declaration on behalf of partners. I would also like to thank BRAC for enabling young people like me and providing opportunities like this. I'm Fairuz Faiza Bithar. As well as my work with BRAC, I'm a co-founder of the Moner School, an online platform that aims to raise awareness around mental health. I'm honored to say a few words on behalf of those who work with the partners and young leaders. We welcome this declaration and commitment to forming a global coalition for young people and future generations. During this global emergency, call on the world's political leaders as they gather this week in New York to support a new deal for our generation and to move from controlling our destinies to giving us space to shape the future. A declaration can only be the start. In it, partners pledge to deliver on promises that are made to young people, but often forgotten. To secure new commitments to fund youth-led and youth-focused movements, and to put young people at the heart of decision-making processes. You have invited us to hold you accountable for these commitments, and we will do so. You also promised to bring together a wide diversity of partners, and we ask you to find meaningful ways of including grassroots organizations. We also look forward to hearing concrete proposals from you on how young people can take leadership and strategic role within the coalition. I would now like to hand back to Aish.
Thank you all so much. And as Fairy said, this is just the start. We're now drawing towards the end of the formal part of this event and we'll soon move to the after party. I'm sorry we're running a bit over, but you'll soon be there. But just before we finish, a few thank yous. First, there's just too many people to thank everyone by name. But that said, I'd like to extend my gratitude to Secretary General Antonio Guterres for inviting young people to be designers of their own future and putting them at the top of his agenda. To heads of state for signalling their support. We really look forward to working with you in the future. To the leaders and activists of all ages who have shared their thoughts and ideas with us today. To Elizabeth Cousins, President and CEO of UN Foundation, for bringing together her fellow leaders to start the Unlocked Coalition. And of course, to all of you who have joined us today. We've now reached the end of the road for me, and it's time to hand over to another of my fellows, Aya Maria, who'll tell you a bit more about the Future Vault and the after party. It's been a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you.
Thanks, Aish. In just 1 minute, we will be placing you into a range of after parties to give you a chance to talk to each other about how to unlock the future. But before we do that, I just want to remind you to consider making a submission to the Next Generation Fellows Future Vote. The concept is simple. What is one thing you would like to save for future generations? The best submissions to the vote are simple but personal. For example, I shared a pair of Lego blocks I found when clearing the streets of my home Beirut after the tragic August 4th blast, because I want to protect the chance for young people to build their own futures. Please share your own examples using hashtag #OneThingForTheFuture. Now it is time for us to kick off the after parties, which are being hosted by a number of our partners. We won't be coming back together after this, so in just a moment, you'll receive an invite to join a breakout room and have the chance to find out more about how to get involved in our joint efforts to unlock the future. I hope you enjoy your discussions and thanks for joining.